Good luck.
Oh, we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Witch Cafe. This month we have book club. And as you know, this is your safe place to talk about anything strange, paranormal, UFO. But today we're talking about books. We have our beautiful logo up. Thank you, Olof. And
You're
I still owe
welcome.
him. Yeah, I still owe him a reading for that. So today we're talking about Above Top Secret, Timothy Good. And as you guys probably know, if you follow me, my voice is being wild. So I'm actually just going to kind of like prompt the gentlemen and then they can like run their mouths. It'll be awesome. So today we have Vinnie, Graeme, Olof, Nathan, and Jay joining us. Maybe Sean. He likes to pop in and show glamour shots of Jay and basically make fun of everybody like the last 15 minutes and then just leave. So we love him. Oh, Nathan's waiting for him. He's a little jealous. He's like, where's my centerfold? All right, guys. So let's get started. Wait, actually, I'm lying. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Thank you to everybody listening now, later, in another dimension. Oh, Sean. He came just to honor us with glamour shots today.
Hey, buddy.
Hi.
So, great to see you.
I'm here.
He made it.
Sorry I'm late.
No worries. Well, thank you to anybody listening now, later, Anomalous Podcast, YouTube, and all that good stuff. All these people are in the description to follow and support. And we will get started. Guys, let's just go over our first impressions of Above Top Secret. What are your thoughts like about the whole book? And just feel free to talk. Carrie, you can ask each other questions. Like I said, I don't want to start coughing, so go for it. So we could start with Vinnie, I guess.
Sure. So it's a big book. I felt there was a lot packed in there. I find myself reading about cases, wanting to know more about those cases. So I feel like this could have been 2 or 3 books, and then they could have possibly expanded on some of the cases in there a little bit more, because some of them are quite brief. I felt like it was a little bit of overload at times. Like just the way you're moving from case to case before you're processing that case that you've just read. It was all a bit like, oof, this is going, a lot in, and yeah. But it was good. It was good. There's so much detail in there as far as there's a lot of government stuff. There's a lot from different countries. So it's just like, yeah, a lot of information to take on board.
Yeah, it's like a who's who of ufology in some respects. I mean, there's name dropping all over the place. You've got Whitley Strieber, you have Stanton Freeman, you've got Jacques Vallée. They're all quoted at different times, and a whole lot of other people. When the book came out in, was it 87? It was a bit of a sensation in the UK. I remember listening to a late night Radio 5, as it was, or 5 Live. On the radio, an interview with him with Nicky Campbell, who was one of the quite a famous sort of disc jockey or DJ or presenter back then. And it was one of these late night programs, but a lot of people stayed up to listen to it because there was a lot of preamble for the show, and there was a lot of trailers for it, and people were really, really stoked up to listen to this. And he just kept, and Tim Good, when he came on, just kept dropping all these little things that were in the book. And Nicky Campbell just couldn't react quick enough. I remember this kind of incredulous kind of tone in his voice. But then people went out and bought the book straight away, and it became a bestseller. And for ufology, that was quite a revelation because, yeah, books were popular back in the 70s and 80s, but nobody had seen a book like this. Now, it has faults, as Vinnie has just mentioned. It's long. The cases are brief. You do feel like it could have been a shorter book with less information in it, but concentrating more on digging out things from the individual cases that he covers. But if somebody wants an all-round kind of look at what ufology is like from the mid-40s right through to when it was written, then this is a good start. It'll whet your appetite for to look deeper into the cases, to find other sources of information. But I'd say if you want an overview of the UFO phenomenon from about 1943 1942, when it sort of kicks off, it has a little bit before that, but really 1942 with the Battle of Los Angeles. And it goes right through to the mid 80s, then really, you can't do much worse than this.
Am I next?
Yeah.
Is that all right? Cool. So yeah, I appreciate everything that's been said so far. As I kind of mentioned earlier on the old Twitter, Timothy Good is really underknown within and under talked about within the field in terms of online discourse these days. And I think it's important to just kind of mention and underline that he was an incredibly important figure for kind of like establishing in some ways a baseline for the cases that we talk about these days. When we talk about the kind of mainstream accepted or widely accepted baseline or center point within online ufology, in a lot of ways, we're kind of talking about the world that Timothy Good wrote about and the cases that he addressed. In some ways, you could say that, you could make a case for maybe 5 or 6 people that around that time and before that really kind of established a lot of the case history that we still talk about these days. We're talking about Donald Kehoe, we're talking about Cora Lorenzen, we're talking about Timothy Good. Often we talk about Jacques Vallée, and there's a lot of, who's a very wily, hard to pin down person, and in a lot of ways, Timothy Good was really kind of like establishing a spine with which a lot of people reference. So, the book itself, sure, it's brief in some of the cases, but it's also kind of establishing, and it was kind of like the establishment spine of ufology for a while. I remember when I was working under Richard Dolan, on his site and helping him with his last book, one of the big secrets is that, not so big secrets, is that Dolan really, really idolized Timothy Good. You know what I mean? And he kind of patterned a lot of his writing and a lot of his career off of Timothy Good, and trying to kind of like flesh out a lot of what he talked about. And in that way, I still think that this book compares favorably against UFOs in the National Security State, which is, of course, Dolan's biggest series of books, in that we're moving around. There's Portuguese cases in here. There's different European cases. There's a bunch of UK cases. And so in a way, this has more variety than UFOs in the National Security State, which has often been kind of one of the commonly cited, like, well, that's it. That's the book that you look at from some wings of ufology. So I'll stop there, but I'm just saying, I think that if someone were to come into the field and were to pick up 10 books to just figure out where has this conversation been happening, what has this conversation been, and kind of compare it to where we are today with Lou Elizondo and what's on the cover of the New York Times or whatever, you could do a lot worse than start around the time of Above Top Secret.
I completely agree. It's a big book. It's got a blue cover. It's got red lettering on the cover. It has white lettering on the cover. It's written by Timothy Good. It's very good. Actually, I've read about half the book, and I haven't read it in order. I think the book actually can be read in slices. The table of contents is really readily accessible, and so I went into sort of areas in the book that, for me at least, were really interesting that I didn't know as much about. I agree with what everyone has said about it. It's, in a way, it's almost like it's like a very rich sort of citation. Like if you were trying to give someone, typically when someone's putting together a research paper, they've got their citations at the end that kind of backs up and buttresses the arguments that they're making. That's really what this book is. It's this sort of rich sort of, reference manual where you can kind of go and see what's been going on in this topic for a few decades up to the late 80s. And I think, the other thing that this book, here we are in 2022, we're still talking about some of this stuff. I think that for me, that's the frustration, right? You talk to folks who are kind of outside of our bubble, and the response often is, well, I don't know if there's that much evidence there. I don't know if there's, if I really believe it. It would really be great if we had some reputable eyewitnesses or sources. And just like the work that Sean does, this book says, oh, you want that kind of stuff? Here you go. And also the work that Graeme's doing, here you go. Here's a bunch of it. And you can jump to one of these different anecdotes and then go and learn more about that if you wish. I was particularly interested in the China component of the book, because it's an area that I just know so very little about and want to know more about. I feel like we are often having this conversation just in our Western little context. And so I think it was really interesting for me just to, get some of the stories out of China that I really wasn't familiar with, and to see the commonality and the similarity from stories that we are all familiar with was just really eye-opening. At the same time, some of the anecdotes that are shared are reminiscent of probably much more prosaic explanation. So there's a few anecdotes about spiral phenomenon in the sky, and we all are much more familiar with that now with rocket reentry and kind of the way that gases and things kind of ignite in the atmosphere. So, knowing all of the stuff that was going on within kind of the space and space defense and air defense in those decades, I think some of those sightings were, pretty much very prosaic. Yes, thank you. So yeah, I would recommend it. I agree. If I were to give folks like a jumping off point where to, pick up a few books and just really dive in, this is definitely a good place to start. I would love to have seen it, though, be broken into almost like volumes. I think that would have been really neat, and then have those volumes be continuous. So what I would like to know at some point, and Graeme might be a good resource for this, but maybe it's a project worth kind of putting together. If we were to look at ufology over the decades, what would be the books that we would say are kind of the good seminal works of cases, the nuts and bolts types of cases for this period of time up to the present, and then just kind of make that a recommended reading list. To me, this seems like it would be, just right at home in that list.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain books, you're right, Nathan, that do cover certain periods in history. There's a Len Stringfield book, which it's Situation Red is at the UFO siege. I believe that covers the 1960s or part of that time. So, and that is for a specific period of time. There are other books, off the top of my head, I can't remember some of the titles now, but they do cover specific periods, which you could then build into a library, which would do the same job as this, albeit in much expanded form, but at least you'd be able to like divide it into chunks. Yeah, you're right about China. Russia's another one that's covered in there, and Russia back in those days, because this is back in the day before the Soviet Union fell, the information that was coming out of there wasn't that well known. You had to subscribe to the likes of Flying Saucer Review and other niche publications in order to get that information at that time. There were certain UFO magazines around which were on the newsstands. Certainly UFO magazine in the UK was around about then, but it didn't have that much information that was reliable. So this was kind of setting as a yardstick, as Jay says, like a spine that that actually defined a kind of parameters. Look, this is the kind of thing we should be doing. This is the kind of information we should be having. The level it is, and backed up with the citations, the footnotes at the back, or the end notes at the back of the book. There's 25 pages of end notes. And I actually appreciate that, because that's the kind of thing I would go and look at those sources myself to make sure that that information was kosher. So where he gets it from, and it usually where you get that information from is actually much more expanded anyway. So you can see what context it lies in. It's not just being pulled out. It's not being cherry picked to try and suit a narrative. That's always important as well. So all those things are really important in this book. And he did sort of set an example that I tried to follow when I wrote the Foo Fighters book, in terms of attributing sources and making sure that we're out of context, etc., etc. So that's really important. But the Russian thing, that was a good source of information for me, for somewhere I didn't really know much about. I'd read a book from the library about UFOs behind the Iron Curtain, but it was one of those books that was written fairly early on in the 1970s, I believe, which was a bit kind of patchy, because some of the information coming out of Russia just either it was very, very brief, or it wasn't entirely reliable. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I like having all the documents in the back and the appendix, because not a lot of books have that, especially ones written around this time. And I feel like not a lot of books written around this time cover like the whole world. It's kind of about like, segmented. But Katie has a comment for Nathan saying, thank you, Jay. He's my, what is it? Like the model?
I'm your Vanna White.
Okay,
Yeah,
I almost
I'm
said
your Vanna
showgirl.
White.
I'm like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. Kitty says, so glad you mentioned our Western lens, Nathan. I would love to see a comprehensive ethnographic study of indigenous anomalous traditions. So that would be very interesting. I just wanted to highlight that one. And I'll be starring your comments, guys, and questions so we can get to them all. And Sean, it's your turn.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell where Graeme gets his style and his inspiration. That's for sure. It's a great book. When I read it, sometimes I felt like I was reading Graham Rendell, and I was happy. I had a smile on my face, so I appreciated that. I do like the documents in the back as well. There are a couple there that I didn't even know existed. So it's really interesting for me, in my perspective, as like when I went into this field, I bypassed the whole publication thing in the books, and I just went straight into the documents and started finding things for myself. So what was really interesting to me was breaking open this book and starting to go through it and read it, and seeing a lot of the things that I found naturally in looking through these documents and stuff, but also it, supplementing, what I have learned with additional knowledge, because obviously this guy was doing it for a lot longer than, I have been. And it was a lot more comprehensive. But, even little things like the NASA thing where it said they're the head, for all UFO questions, which must have lasted like 5 minutes or something. I remember finding that document, and all that. So it was really neat. But then there's, like a rundown by the Navy in the back and stuff. And I didn't know that existed. So it was pretty cool. And then there were cases like of a jet disappearing when it was chasing a UFO, and people disappearing, all stuff that I didn't run into. So I thought the book was great, and I really appreciated how, he wasn't afraid to, touch on the more sensitive aspects, whether it be contact or what the saucer looks like inside or out. I really appreciated that Majestic 12 that he actually took that stuff on. And it also reminded me of Graeme too, how he takes on how people say the saucers are German or whatever. Like he'll take it on, but also just give you the facts behind it, and it is what it is. And I appreciated that because whether some people like it or not, this stuff is a part of ufology. It really is. And battling what's true and what isn't is really what this fight is a lot of the time. Because to just look clear at it with a clear perspective is really a lot of times the hardest part, but it also should be the goal. So, and I see a lot of that in his work, as I do in Graeme. So I really enjoyed it. Like Nathan, I did not read it all. The thing is huge, but I read a good amount of it because it's interesting, and I got the book on tape. So I'll also be, going through different chapters with that, because I feel like what I do, especially, I can learn a lot and get a lot of clues that I can take with me to, even find more stuff. So I think it's a great book, especially if it's huge, like Vinnie said, and it could be made smaller. But if somebody's going to come into the topic and they're really genuinely curious and genuinely interested, I think it's a great, what could you say? It's a good initiation book. Read this book. If you're still interested, welcome to the club. If you're not, or it's too much or whatever, I think it's a good litmus test. So I think it's a great book, and it's a great starter book for sure. That then allows you to go deeper into the different topics and sides to this. So, sorry,
I totally agree with that. No, I need you guys to talk a lot today because because my voice. But
for
I agree.
I had...
Yeah, tell us about your evening and
nothing. I'm angry.
Sorry for dropping out.
Oh, it's all right. We just add you right back in. So we haven't heard from you about the book yet. First of all, everybody clap for Olof because he made us a logo.
Thank you.
It's gorgeous. So what did you think about the book, Olof? Did you finish it this time? I don't think who actually finished the book.
I mean, I think I finished it. I actually had to go through it twice because I think I fell asleep a couple of times because I listened to it on audiobook. But so I'm really thankful for that, because I'm not sure if I could have gotten through it that easily if I had to read it. So I mean, I I had I think it was lots of things that piqued my interest, you know. So the times where you actually put in some if you really concentrated, you know, and because it was really fast, lots of information, lots of acronyms, and it's kind of hard for me to keep up, you know, and especially someone reading really fast also. So that was a bit of a minus maybe. But like I like the way they talked about the transparent aspirin, or like it was like instantly thinking about like Tic Tacs and the stuff, like it was so many themes that just came back that we see in media today. And so but so, and obviously since I'm from Sweden, I always enjoy hearing about the ghost rockets and the ghost flyers, and just diving a bit more into that. And I think it's so interesting to see, like because he took up some of the aspects about how media censorship and like stuff like that works into this field, and how they really early on basically cemented what was to come, like the narrative that was to come. Like the thing about you had like the reports in Scandinavia, in Norway and Sweden and Finland about the ghost rockets, and and suddenly in the news they got directions to not say where it happened, or if it crashed or exploded or stuff like that. So I think we got censored, like obviously very early on. And it shows today as well, because like ghost rockets, like it's really cool, it's like a Swedish thing among other countries, you know, but many people in Sweden don't even know about it. Like the interest is really low, even though it's growing a lot, obviously. But yeah, so that's about that's what I felt about it.
I think that was pretty good, especially the acronym piece is interesting, because when I first started, like even reading documents or whatever, you know, if you're like me, you want to know what it means, but if you take the time to look up every one as it comes, like it makes everything take that much longer for sure, you know. So I don't know if anyone wants a tip. It's you can pretty much just, like, if you hear an acronym, just ignore it and listen to the story. And if you're further interested, go back and figure out what it is. You know,
You
like, I
just need to
think
make a
those are
cheat
more
sheet.
important if you want to take the story farther and find it for yourself. You know,
Sean,
and find
the
other
whole
stories.
Sean, the whole phenomenon is an acronym. It's
Yeah.
UFO,
Yeah.
UAP.
Yeah.
The irony.
Unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
UFO acronyms. Yeah, we need a cheat sheet, Sean, for people that don't want to
Yeah.
do their own work.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But there's so many, you
there
know.
really is. I
Yeah.
know, like when I started looking through documents, I'm like, I don't know if I have like the attention span for this, because they're cool. But at the same time, I'm like, wait, what does that mean? You have to like look up everything because it has all these weird like phrases and terms in it. So yeah, I agree with that.
I actually have one of those cheat sheets. I actually did put one. I put one together for Kurt Jaimungal. I got it somewhere. It probably needs a lot adding to it.
Yeah. Is it more for like a current cheat sheet? It'd be interesting to add, like, all the way from the Army Air Force to
yeah,
now.
I think if I put it over your way, Sean, it would certainly double in size.
Yeah. Hey, that could be a good idea though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
I think we should print it as a book. It probably
Now that would be an audiobook, just
Hey, tick.
Yeah.
Somebody said the audiobook for this is pretty short. Is it Jason said? Yeah, the audiobook was much shorter than the actual book. So
Yeah, it's kind of a
Interesting.
greatest hits from the book
Okay.
excerpts.
Right, so
Yeah.
it doesn't cover everything. It's just read quicker as well, is it?
Yeah, I think it felt like I tried speeding it up at points, but
Yeah,
then
I
it
do
was
that
like I
sometimes.
can't even understand it, so it felt speeded up.
Alien
Just
bodies
at
every Patterson Airport space over the.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, maybe it wasn't the full book. I saw that it was lots of different versions as well.
That
I
makes
even
sense.
had
I wish I
to.
wouldn't have wasted my money. I didn't know that.
Olaf, your
I-
fan club came here apparently.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. Hey, Akashi. So I even had to register because I have Audible in UK, and then I had to, because they don't even have the book in stock. So I had to get like a new Audible for the Americas
Yeah.
to even get the book. So I'm not sure if
Well-
it's the full
well,
version or
Graeme
I
should
don't
be sending you a check for that. So.
I already got a check.
Okay.
It's for the cover.
Yeah, you've
Oh,
been
there
paid
you
for
go.
you've been paid for the cover. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of
Beautiful. That
acronyms, one that came up to me that really jumped off the page that we don't talk a lot about, but I feel like is a big player in the U.S. side is the NSA. I mean, what are folks' thoughts on that organization
Oh,
and their
good.
kind of role in this entire story?
Dude, I can give you like 360, 70 pages of NSA UFO observations. It's insane. I mean, I have a whole crap load of them. And it's hilarious because there's maybe like 5 where they go further than what I'm about to say, which is they usually say, light, it's all blacked out, and then probable balloon every time. Like
So
that
crazy.
was like that's just like a part of the script. It's so frustrating. Of probably balloon, probable balloon, probable balloon.
Right? Like they
And
have a
then
list. You can pick these 3 things, insert it. You know what I mean? Balloon.
And it's not
this,
even that. It's just balloon. It's not even like, at least Blue Book would say, oh, it could be a meteorite or a bolide or whatever. Like, no, these guys just probable balloon. And there's almost like 400 pages of them. So that the NSA has some information on this stuff. But I made the point on Twitter, like if you look at the Foreign Technology Division documents, and Graeme knows this, like all of them, advanced copies and everything were sent to everybody. DIA, not NSA. I always say that, but I get it screwed up with somebody else. But Navy a lot of times got them. FBI got them. Like all these people get these reports and know about this stuff. So
You just have to look at the kind of the list of agencies that these reports were actually copied to, not just where they were actually intended to, and the lists sometimes are vast. So yeah, Sean's right. But the NSA, no such agency, as it's nicknamed.
but it was something else that was in there.
It would be actually interesting to find out which agencies in America don't have UFO reports, because there can't be many of them.
Yeah. NIN,
That's a
I
good
see a lot.
question.
I have no idea what that is, but
I keep seeing that a lot at the moment, NIN.
yeah.
And I keep thinking of 9 Inch Nails.
Right.
As you should.
I don't think they were around either, though. Then maybe.
Yeah.
That Trent Reznor guy, watch out.
Are we
Hope
all
this
in
one in the
nails
chat
age
will
here,
know.
guys?
There's the FTD was known as AFNIN. So the only thing I can think of is maybe they shorthanded it or something. I don't know.
Right. Well, one thing that really stood out to me that I really paid attention to and read through a few times, being from the UK, was some of the stuff quite near the start, and it was to do with the connection between the media, the mainstream media, and the government and GCHQ, MI5, MI6. And there's a case I'm working on at the moment that involves the possibility of a D notice. So this is directly, blocking something from coming out publicly through these kind of connections, these channels that connect the media to the MOD and things like that. And I found that really fascinating. And that led on to the fact that there had been conversations in the House of Commons for decades. Like I've got it in front of me here, the 64, 66, 67, 68, all these big debates in the House of Commons, some in the House of Lords as well. And because it's so quiet right now here in the UK, that really stood out to me. I was like, why isn't this happening now? And yeah, it's frustrating, but fascinating at the same time.
Yeah, the media thing is the same here too.
Mhm.
There's this one set of documents I found where literally, I think it was, I forget the dude's name, but the Air Force public office guy for UFO investigations was setting up something for Quintilla to go to this media thing where there were just newspapers, Hector, then James McDonald, and another guy, and it was, you could tell like the whole thing was, even in the correspondence they said, the media gets this wrong a lot, so this is our chance to send somebody there and give our point of view and stuff. And you can just tell like behind the scenes they were like, because after that things seemingly did change, like the stories and such, because they were quite spectacular before then, where the media would love a good, alien ship story. And then things just kind of, changed where they would wait for the Air Force to say something and then produce that story. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Like, the media is like, we're not stupid, right? I mean, come
Of
on. There's
course.
Project Mockingbird, all that stuff. Like, the media is, even the FOIA Navy documents, like there's media talking to the Navy people. The Navy people are trying to get their story straight, what they're going to tell the media. One of them's an information warfare agent. It's like, all these people are up to stuff. It's so
Yeah,
frustrating.
it said at one point that the BBC World Service, so the global version of the BBC, were getting direct channels to foreign intelligence as well.
Yeah.
And surely that's going to go through agencies in the US, and the UFO thing is in there. I mean, that's just a buddy system. Like, we'll give you something if you report it in a certain way, or if you don't put it out. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
Lots of integrity
interesting.
involved. Yeah.
Coming back to the book,
No.
if you've looked at the next one that he wrote, Beyond Top Secret, I'm not sure if anybody here has,
Oh
but
no, not yet.
you will find that some of the paragraphs and some of the sections in here are lifted verbatim and reprinted.
Ooh.
Oh, so if you look at Beyond Top Secret, don't knock yourself out going to read it, because not a huge amount, but there are sections in this which are effectively repeated word for word.
Well,
I'm gonna put it in the hat for the next month.
what's that about? Explain that a little more, Graeme, if you don't mind.
If there's going to be a proper criticism of the book, that would be my criticism. That there
Oh
are.
yeah, let's give everybody's
It's lifted directly into the next book, so the next book is slightly padded out by he may, I don't know whether he had enough information to actually do a proper one, or whether there was a rush to get it out, maybe by his publishers, to get something out to follow it within a certain period of time, and he just couldn't manage it for whatever reason. Couldn't have done the research or do the verification, etc. But there's a lot of it is repeated, unfortunately.
Should have just called it the rerun. I'm talking too much. Somebody else.
As far as criticisms, I don't have like a big one to levy. I think it is, for the modern reader, I think it is kind of a daunting book to pick up, because we are now so accustomed to very digestible, bites of information. So you're going to find yourself like having to commit real time to this work, and that in a way too, like a lot of these stories we've already heard, but there's a lot that we haven't. So I think this really is part of the challenge in a way with this topic just generally. And I know, Sean, you've bumped into this with the work that you do. There is so much material, like there really is. Yet everyone is coming to this conversation right now, it's just like they're at the last 2 minutes of the exam period or whatever, and I think it's over. So I think that's it's not, I don't know that it. My criticism is it's too big, but on the other hand, it's sort of like we're in a different time now, so it's really kind of more too big for where we are, and there are probably other ways of getting this material that I would be more prone to suggest to folks who want to get into it quick, and get that kind of like quick fix of information. Once they're in, then you can say, yeah, hey, now that you're here, there's a lot more stuff. Take a look at this, take a look at these other, deeper dive documents and books. So I don't know, maybe in a way, it's an okay introductory book. On the other hand, I would probably be more like, hey, if you're just getting started, like pick up In Plain Sight, or pick up what is it, UFOs, pilots, the Leslie Kane one, the generals on the record and things like that. So they're not as big, a little more recent, and then the writing is a lot, I think, more entertaining. Or In Plain Sight, just listen to it, because Ross is, really fun to listen to. So.
Yeah, he's fun to listen to, his little impersonations. But I kind of like having all of the different accounts in one book too, like the older ones like this. And I think, you really have to like to read, because this is like real reading. It's not like quick paragraphs. It's just as the information, it's almost like he's just reporting what he's found, which is good to an extent. But like you said, people that are, readers now want it to be quick. They want it to be, they don't want to get too much into the detail. It's kind of, it's sad in a way, but I get it. Get to the point. But yeah, I like it because it has everything in one spot. If I wanted to go look up some of the more famous cases quickly, I could easily grab this book and just like find it to show somebody, if that makes any sense. So like a reference book almost.
Yeah. Again, like Richard, I remember Richard Dolan, that is, that this was his most commonly referenced book. And he actually, as I recall, he had at least 3 copies of it. And he works in his basement, and he also works on his upper floor, and he had like 1 on the bottom, or 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top, which shows you how much he ran to it. Another thing along the lines of the reference book is that, we're talking about largely pre-internet material. And so these appendices like these, or at the end of Passport to Magonia, for example, which has kind of pre-World War II case history, for the most part, that were culled from newspapers and things like that Jacques found. That was kind of like how information trafficked before the internet among ufologists and people that were really following the field. If they didn't have, if it wasn't in the meat of the book, the appendices were a way to get that out. And so when you're looking back here, you've got the hotel memo, and you've got other big memos back here. And for a lot of people, and then some like criminally blacked out pages, but in those days, that might have been the only way that you would encounter those kinds of documents, before the land of Sean Roche and before the land of Isaac Coy or Keith Bassfield or John Greenwald or whoever you want to go to in terms of docs.
It's a great point. That was like your little paper Google UFO reference book. I think Nathan makes a good point too. Maybe it's not the best first book to get into if you're interested to dip your toes in the water, maybe In Plain Sight. But I think it's your first good deep dive book. Like if you said, okay, I'm gonna start learning stuff, I'm ready, then you could do it.
I'm serious right now to read. I kind of had that mentality too for a minute. I was like, when I was reading, I was like, all right, I'm going to sit down tonight and I'm really going to get into this book. And like, I used to do that, but it's so easy to just research on your phone now, or like go watch one of Sean's videos, or go to his little document website that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, or, all the document websites. But yeah, sorry, Vinny, I cut you off.
It's all good. I was just going to say, the good thing that I did find about it is, and for someone maybe who is a bit newer coming into it, is you can read all of that and find the one thing or a couple of things that really stand out to you. Then you can go off in that direction. Someone else might go off in that direction. So it gives that baseline for choosing your area to go to next. And it really does stand up to that, for me.
For the nerds around in the sort of late in the 80s, like me, who were like reading every kind of UFO book they could get their hands on from the library or from the bookstore, then this was a revelation because of just how big it was and how much information was in it and what the time it would take you to read it. It was never ending. Whereas other books, you were lucky if you got 150 pages. Sometimes, if you were really lucky, 200 pages from a book. But a lot of it was padded out with just kind of theories, and there wasn't much meat to the books. Certainly wasn't any. But just generally, there was a lot of kind of just talk about, it might be this, it might be that, and going off at tangents, whereas this actually did stick to what it was advertising. It was a book about UFOs. And for me, when I remember reading it for the first time, I got it out of the libraries in hardback first of all, and then bought my own paperback copy when it was released about 3 or 4 years later. But I remember just having, as you said, Pricilla, having to sit down and remember to say, yeah, I need this time to sit and do it justice. I can't just like do 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. I'll lose track of it. I had to actually spend like an hour a night or something going through it until I was finished. But because you say it was before the internet, you had the time. That was what you did back then. Is what I did all through the late 70s and all the way through the 1980s, and even halfway through the 90s. Even dial-up. When you had dial-up internet, you didn't have access to this kind of information to your fingertips. So it was what people did, and that's probably why it was so popular, because it came along before that sort of those circumstances ended. But yeah, it was a revelation, because it was just so much information that you'd never seen in one particular title before.
It's
And
probably
yeah,
not
we take that for granted now. We take that for granted because it's information everywhere. You can get it so easily. But I think we need it because, people don't have books like this anymore, aside from the ones you've been writing, Graeme. Like people don't write thick books anymore with just tons of detail, and I love it.
Are you
I
saying
will say that your writing's more entertaining than his, though. So.
Am I the 21st century Tim Good?
We're all depending on you.
Definitely more
entertaining.
Was it harder, Graeme, to like verify stuff then though? Like you get that book, you look at some of the documents in the back. Like for instance, now if you'll post something on Twitter, people go, "What is your source? Where did you get it?" And I understand that, but like back then, like
I got that the other day with the OSI document I put on Twitter that somebody said,
"That's my fault."
What's the number and file reference of this?
Witness Citizen, Google Drive, folder 15, District 15. Yeah, but I mean, like, how are you supposed to know? Like, you can't go on CIA FOIA and I'm going to check this out. How would you verify that stuff? I suppose
back then you were
maybe that's why
people's
Majestic
gospel.
12 got popular.
Yeah, you were literally trusting people back then because it was in a book, therefore it must be true. And until I knew better, when I was sort of in my early teens, when I first started, from about 9 till 13, 14, when I was starting to read things like this, everything I read, it was true because it was in a book. But then when you start to have a bit more critical thinking skills, then you started questioning and all the rest of it, and you had other sources of information, other magazines, other books to compare it against. If you notice in the back, all the documents, he actually goes quite large on MJ12 because it was a new thing then. It was the envelope that was passed under Jimmy Sandera's under his door with this manila envelope with all these documents in that had been photocopied. They weren't originals, they were photocopies. So you can't even test the source documents. And yet everybody back then was falling over themselves to go, yeah, these are true because they're just so wonderful. And they tell the story that everybody wants to hear about the background to UFOs, except might be all bollocks, really. So, to want of a better expression. But unfortunately, back then, he did buy into it big time. And I don't think he was ever swayed from that. Certainly, the subsequent books I read, I don't think it was any criticism of MJ12. It just seemed to be a done deal. It was accepted. But a lot of people back then, sort of fell for it as well. So, and I don't know how many people now still buy into that being completely 100% genuine.
Yeah, I think some people, and I've been purposely staying away from them, because I know it'd be an endless trap for myself. But from what I hear from other people who have been researching a lot longer than I have, there seems to be maybe like 2 or 3 real documents in there, possibly, and the rest is probably fake. But how are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to know without finding corroborating evidence?
They're so old. The documents are so old. Like they just have been submitted to this one place, and you're like, it's hard to know like what to trust when you're reading it, even if it's off of, a government website with a bunch of documents.
Well, a lot of it makes sense, like the Wilbur Smith memo. I mean, like that kind of hints at maybe some of the Majestic 12 stuff could be accurate, and that's an official memo. So I don't know. It's tough. Yeah.
One interesting thing I think I won't mention who this was, but I got a really interesting phone call a little while back, and it was after we announced that we were doing this book, and it was somebody that would be in kind of a position to have a lot of information, and they were pointing out that the UK version of this book and the US version of it have a couple.
Call.
That's right, a couple key differences, and one of those key differences is one of the docs that's associated with Bob Lazar, who, of course, back in the late '80s was a new thing in terms of. And that's another notable thing here, along with the MJ12 docs and stuff like that, that Tim Good was one of the first people, along with George Knapp, of course, to really kind of historicize Bob Lazar and to kind of put him into the literature in a way. But in this phone call, it's really interesting. So this doc was redacted in the U.S. version. I've got the U.S. version. I think Mr. Rendell has the UK version, right?
I couldn't actually find it in the book. For some reason.
Yeah,
No,
apparently it had been redacted. But apparently there's a Bob Lazar doc in the back that has it's supposedly Bob's social security number. Okay. Now the weird thing about that is, of course, you're not supposed to publish social security numbers, so maybe that's why it was redacted. But this person who shall remain nameless said, okay, that number, that social security number that Bob wrote on that doc, is if you look into that social security number, it's a fishy social security number that's been associated with several names. And he wouldn't go any further. And I was like, that is really fascinating.
I got a different story from Phone Call Guy.
Really? Yeah. What'd you get from Phone Call Guy?
My Phone Call Guy, it said something about like it was Office of Navy Intelligence.
Oh,
so
that's
it should
right,
be
too.
ONI, but in the America version, like on the W2, it had to do with the W2. It didn't say ONI, it said like ON something else, which didn't exist.
Right. And he mentioned that as well to me. And so that already makes it kind of a fishy doc. But the fact of the weird social security numbers is kind of, well, because you've got the US version probably, right?
Yeah, but I thought it was in both, but one was redacted, one was one.
Anyway,
so I think I think the CIA is just trying to mix our brains up.
Graeme,
I haven't found it yet.
Yeah. Graeme has the English, so
I've got the English version, but
I want to know who Phone Call Guy is.
Tell me afterwards.
It's Jay and I just calling each other.
Phone Call Guy is Sean. They're just calling each other.
And in my version, it's in Chinese.
What?
What page is that?
I'm just kidding.
We're all like looking around.
Bob Lazar's W2 in Chinese.
I forgot it's that time of the book club where Sean just starts messing with us.
Yeah.
I think. No, actually, this time he's bang on because there's the page in the book he's just showed you. So the page it is in there.
Now you're
let's
just showing
everybody's. Let's start getting book recommendations written down because I write stuff. So.
Oh, in terms of like 20th century ufology, like, or in terms of for next month, or what are you talking about?
Yeah, next month. But we can do the other things too if you want.
I'll go in hard on Flying Saucer Fever. I'm about 100 pages in. The author's right here. He can pop quiz us if we don't finish. It's about case history from 1950 to 1952. It's really fascinating. It goes into a lot of depth, and it's also like a nice, easy, breezy read at the same time. I like it a lot.
I think Vinny's got a request about that, though, haven't you, Vinny?
I have. I said this before we came on air. I've spoken to Graeme about getting a signed copy because we're going to the Ancient Aliens conference at the end of June. So I was going to hold off so I can just pick it up off Graeme get it signed. I'll take my other one down to get signed. And my fear was that I would need to buy it before because it came up in book club. So, but hey, if it has to work that way, I'll just have to carry it with me to the conference. But yeah.
I'm available to read it then.
I'm putting it in. You can just get it signed when you get there if it gets fixed.
Yeah, exactly. It's all good.
And he's not. And Vinny's not going. And Vinny and I aren't going to be the only ones there, apparently.
Yeah, I'm going to be there. So
And phone call guy?
Oh, really?
And phone call guy.
Is
Well,
phone
I'm
call guy
not,
gonna be there?
I'm not a speaker guy or anything. I'm just going to show up. So
Yeah,
The
Money
speakerphone guy.
Nation in the
Mhm.
house.
Yeah,
Drinks on
Nathan.
me,
Good
boys.
to see you. Be good to meet you in real life.
yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
Are you really going?
Awesome.
Yeah, he is.
Oh
yeah.
man.
yeah. It
That's
just
so
happened
dope.
to be. We
That's
were going to be
awesome.
there anyway. So I didn't know about the dates, and then Vinny was like, "These are the dates." So I was like, "Well, that's actually where I'm going to be in that part of the country at the same time." So we're
Sweet.
just gonna, yeah,
That's so cool.
yeah,
And you
I'm
get to
already
meet Rick
jealous.
Doty possibly as well.
yeah. There you go.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Speaking of phone call guy. Anyway,
I'm doing
that's
a
another story.
UFO conference in my living room for the neighborhood kids. I'm making them pay $50 too.
Unseen footage.
Yeah, we got some footage.
A doc never seen before.
Mhm.
Johnny was complaining he couldn't come up with the money. I told him to talk to his mom. But we'll see.
That's uncanny.
You should really see Sean's Giorgio Tsoukalos outfit. His costume for Giorgio
No.
is really good though.
Do you really have
Say that.
this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's my Halloween costume.
I love it.
Yep.
Can you just show up next month dressed as Giorgio?
There's aliens on caves in the basement. What?
That meme that has a picture of him doing his alien thing. It's like it looks like a tanning salon blew up in this guy's face because he's just like super tan in the picture and his hair sticking up. All right, Vinny, what's yours?
I've done this one before. I'm going to do it again. It is Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena by my colleague, mine and Graham's colleague, Adam Goldsack of UAP Media UK. Let's do it.
we've had it in there. I told him on there. I was like, I'm putting you in again. We've been trying.
Yeah, making that a plus
I gotta
2
write a
for
book.
Adam's book from me as well.
Yay!
And I'm just start reading it.
If I read a book, will we cover it?
Yes. I was going to ask you when your book's coming out.
All right. I'll do it. You guys are just I'm gonna just load it with misinformation too, just to see who buys what. I'm just kidding.
You would as well, wouldn't you?
And
As
then
long
on the
as long
Aztec
as
crash,
it's got
there's
good-
one thing no one's ever said, and it's that all the bodies had roller skates on.
Will it have glamour images in the middle?
Jay's face is going to be the book, like a UFO hat.
That's right.
I'm ready to illustrate
Sean,
it, Sean. Let's do it.
There you go.
Except
Jay,
one. who had
cattle
ice
friends.
skates.
You know, Sean, you said you were going to write a forward for one of my books. I might rescind that offer now.
Rollerblades and rollerblades.
I don't know if I can doubt the kind of the certainty of the information that will be in the forward.
I'm glad I'm writing this forward because I can finally tell you where the sport baseball came from. Well, it was in 1934. Maui and Mughal came down with.
I like how this is how every book club episode ends. We just
Yeah,
go
that's why I got to
right off.
start like 30 minutes
Yeah,
early
yeah.
getting people's
Goes off over the
suggestions.
cliff towards-
I'm gonna put my
I have
suggestion
kids. I know how
again,
this works.
the identified flying objects, Dr. Michael Masters. I'll be the different guy, but
Ooh.
I like that everyone has something I'm already interested in reading, so it won't really bother me whatever we pick.
And that one was unidentified.
Identified.
Identified. That's right.
Why are we reading about stuff that's already identified?
Right? Come on, we figured it
We
out.
need to read it and find out.
Hey, I know what this
So-
is. Let me tell you.
Mike Masters is a pretty cool guy. I had lunch with him at the Houston conference. I
Here we
really,
go.
really enjoyed it.
Nonchalant. Oh, I just so happened to like hang out with him.
Yeah, we're talking to him this week, so looking forward to that interview.
Right on.
Time
I mean,
to
if
find
it's-
real.
If it sounds like a humble brag, it can be levied. It can be kind of like mitigated by the fact that we were both eating like pretty bad sandwiches at the time. Like they were
Like
not very
bad,
good
like
at all.
unhealthy, or just like bad, like horrible.
They just weren't the good. They were like
Fish
they were
fillets,
like cafeteria
balls.
sandwiches, basically. I mean, it was nobody's fault. They were free, which was incredible.
How
but
dare you
they
think you
were
were a
not that
crappy
great.
sandwich
Yeah, I know.
list.
Yeah, I'm talking. I know it's a gift horse in the mouth situation. I already regret it.
Don't they know who you are?
Anyway,
Nice and
Jay, I
sloppy.
hate free sandwiches king. I mean, come on.
it's my new thing.
Yeah.
It's my new. I hate free food. That's my new.
Well, at least
thing.
you've
Believe it or
moved
not,
on
I
from
was
the cow
eating
thing.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
Anything to break free of the cattle mutilation situation.
Why do
So
I always
dead
put my
cows,
foot in
dead
my mouth like
sandwiches.
5 minutes before the end of the show?
Having lunch with masters, and you're too fancy for cafeterias. Anything else?
And you mutilate a cow for two-
I'm good.
slices
I
of
think I'm
bread.
good. I think I did enough damage to my reputation.
All right, who's
for the
next?
day.
Sean, did you go yet?
I'll pick Encounter in Rendlesham Forest.
Bye.
Nick Pope, Jim Burrows, and Jim Peniston.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh man, I wanted to hear Graeme go off.
No, no. That's beyond me. That's behind me now. I'm good. Although I did
He's not
see
that
somebody
person anymore.
mentioning the Glocker in the chat, and Ellie did one.
I saw that.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
too.
It's not about Pope, okay? It's about the
No, it's not.
story.
All right, I think Olaf is next.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take the Dolan book again. What's it called? Aliens, Alien Agendas.
Alien agendas,
Um,
yeah. Mhm.
I still haven't gotten to read it, and
Cool.
so
I haven't read a Dolan book yet. That'd be cool.
Good choice. It's a good choice.
Yeah.
I'd like
All
to
right,
read
so everybody here went, and then we have Katie Helen's recommendation for next month, Extraterrestrial by Avi Loeb,
it. Ooh,
Oh.
nice.
which I've been
I
wanting to
like
read.
that.
So I was
Very
like,
cool.
Yeah, me too.
yeah.
I thought we decided we were going to veto that one.
No, we just had said that we would only do it if we had all had to listen to Avi reading the audio version.
Oh my god.
That would be hilarious.
That would be great.
All right, so they are all in the hats. Blue and UAP secrecy, but upside down.
Please be my book. Please be my book. Please.
All right.
I've already read half of it. Please be my book. Please be my book.
I
Hey,
know.
look
I know.
what it is,
None of these
guys.
books are 400 pages,
Extraterrestrial by Avi Loeb.
God damn
All
it.
right.
Yes.
First,
All
first
right.
suggestion, Katie, you got it.
Well done.
All right. Now,
Um,
what we haven't told Katie is the first one we pick gets thrown out.
Says Sean. Sean,
You
you
have
like
to be
rigged it for
present
like
on
3
the
months
show to get
straight.
your book.
So we read all your
That's true. Yes. I should be banned.
We could never.
Oh, that's gonna be awesome.
Well, if we've got a
All
couple
right.
minutes, Priscilla, I wanted to give
Oh, we
folks
do.
a quick take on the book does end sort of saying why the secrets. What are folks top level? I know that could be an entire 2 shows, but top level thoughts on why the secrecy.
They don't want to admit they don't know what's happening.
Exactly.
It's been that for years, in my opinion. They have a certain amount of knowledge, but it doesn't lead to understanding. And they've got pretty much as far as they can go with modern sort of technology in terms of trying to relate it to what we know already about, the universe and physics and all the rest of it. And I think they're just waiting until our knowledge base increases to a point where we can actually start understanding it. They'll probably just dust all, if they do have any kind of retrieved craft or anything like that, they'll just dust it down every so often and see, right, can we understand a bit more now? No. Okay, we'll go back in a few years' time. And that's it. I'm sure that's how it works. And because obviously countries around the world, especially powerful ones like America, Russia, China, etc., don't want to admit that they can't necessarily defend their citizens or defend their airspace or do anything about what's happening, then it's better just to keep stum and not say anything that might frighten people or panic the stock market or anything, you name it. And they just keep quiet because better not to admit weakness and just get on and just hope that nothing actually happens.
Yeah, and I think what's frustrating as well is you see all the military branches and the 3-letter agencies back then were all separate, like clinging on to their own little piece of the puzzle, not communicating, not talking. We still see that today. Maybe if we do get them all together, God forbid that ever happens, that we might be able to just move a little bit further forward, even if it's not the big picture. It's like a little step forward. But nope, we still don't get it. And I think, that's why I guess we've got this new law and, oversight committees now looking at it a bit more, because it's like it really does need to get to that point. Yeah.
I mean, I think Graham and Vinny, you're obviously right to a certain extent, and you can see that in the documents. There's one document that I resort to and go back to all the time, where it's this Air Force guy, and he writes up some of the problem, and he goes, "It's going to come to a time where the tail wags the dog, so to speak," because really what they were doing is they didn't want to admit their vulnerabilities, right? It's impossible to be able to identify every single thing that flies over America, and they knew it was impossible, and they were afraid of the time when that would catch up to them, you know whether it's, and I'm not saying because it's a UFO, but because there's meteorites. There's so many times that they have to say possibly or probably because they can't prove it. Like if somebody lets off a balloon here, there's so many instances where maybe it's this, maybe it's that. We'll never know. And they can't admit that because that's a huge vulnerability. But then there's also instances where, that some people may know more than others. The phenomenon has been admitted as real so many times since 1947. And you can't tell me that there's not at least some group of people, that were actually serious about this and maybe just like went to some hidden part of the government and worked hard on it and nobody else knows. And another thing that's I go to is Colonel Corso, and whatever you think of him, what he said about this makes sense. He goes, the government is so big, if you leave it alone, it covers itself up. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. There could be, and if I had to guess, that's all I could do, is that there is some sort of something somewhere that knows a lot more about this than probably our government, even maybe even the DoD. Whether that's like a Lockheed Martin or just like a breakaway civilization or something like that, or technology like we've been hearing from Elizondo or Corbell, who knows? But I think there's probably more knowledge on this than we think, but maybe it's not where we would expect it to be. But that's, just speculation, of course.
Or like I always go back to what I know people are gonna be like, oh, Team Lou Elizondo girl over here. But when he talked about, when he talked about the somber feeling and maybe we're not the top of the food chain and they might know that. And like a lot of you said, the panic involved with some people. Like I keep going back to my friend too. Like, well, if UFOs are real and there's extraterrestrials, that means we're not God's most special children. And that's what her reasoning was. And she's somebody who doesn't want to know about all this stuff. Some people are just happy with surface level, what they're told, they're happy. But can you imagine all the people that don't want to know about this stuff are terrified of it, finding out what Lou said, we might not be the top of the food chain. And like just the fact that he said the somber truth behind it all. We don't want it to be that, but it's definitely a possibility. Even if it is a breakaway civilization, thinking that like we thought we were alone this whole time and we're coexisting with these other beings that can do all this stuff with our consciousness and with physics that we don't understand yet. It's
Jay says cough. National Labs cough.
Yeah,
I saw that as well in Katie's comment with DOE. My theories and speculation in the past has always been a small breakaway group, maybe from different areas, coming together in this grey area that sits between military, between the Department of Energy, the DoD, that's just a select few that have no oversight anywhere, don't answer to anybody. They are completely compartmentalized away from everything. Maybe it's programs within programs within programs. We've heard of that in the past. So it really could be anywhere with absolute no trail anywhere.
Yeah, the Department of Energy thing's definitely an interesting take.
Yeah.
Because they're just kind of in the background, like not getting involved. You know what I mean? And it makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with every point here. I mean, one that's come through from pretty high level people is really the panic element, and the unrest element. And there's been really surprising people that I've heard that really believe that, in terms of people that we think of as kind of pillars of the community or pillars of kind of government disclosure or something like that we'll privately talk about. Well, we still have to do this whole kind of like roll out over a period of years because there is this element of where we're concerned about this, and all they have to do is like point at how effed up the rest of civilization is right now, you know.
Mhm.
And it's a perfectly good excuse all the time. It's like, oh, there's a war, we can't do it right now. It's like, there's
Yeah.
always a war, you know.
Yeah.
Like, oh, things are burning down, the environment's collapsing. Well, it's always collapsing, you know.
Right.
And so there's that element that kind of boggles the mind and frustrates, but it's also, you know, there is an element of that that's somewhat understandable, and at the same time there's an element where ripping the Band-Aid off is what we always want, you know. And if we, you know, so many of us have had episodes of ontological shock where we're just like, oh my god, the world is different than I thought it was, and it's hard to deal with. But you know, I still put on my shoes every day, you know, and people can survive, you know. It's all right. Maybe we'll just have to have a week where nobody shows up to work.
Everybody
You
get
know?
the week off.
Deal with it.
Extraterrestrials are will,
Anyway, don't
or
they?
we have a breakaway civilization.
Yeah,
Right.
humans adapt to all types of like situations. We can live in space, you know, given enough kind of resources and effort. We can live at the bottom of the sea with the same kind of, you know, parameters. We live in the hot countries, we live in cold countries, wet, dry, all the rest of it. We're quite an adaptable species. We would get over the culture shock. We might need people to help us through it, but we'd certainly get over it. We would certainly adapt to whatever it brings.
And what does that mean, right? Does that mean like if they prove and bring hard evidence and say, okay, this stuff is real, look at this video and this data, does that mean all of a sudden we're like walking with these things to work now, or they're our boss, or they're driving the buses and stuff? No,
Right.
like I mean, it's still really no different than it is now, other than this
Right.
additional information, right? As far as we know, I guess, you know.
Admitting it's real, there's a real phenomenon on the behalf of governments doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the things are going to appear on the White House lawn.
Right.
It could just be the same as exactly the same what we've got now, that they keep popping up different places, different times to different people, and not necessarily everybody, but at least everybody now knows there's something going on. And actually people might look out more than they do already, or recognize things that they don't necessarily recognize at the moment. So that might be just a good thing.
A lot more people reporting planes, that's for sure.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, they don't want to do that. I saw two lights blinking. I'm sure that is, did you check your flight radar? No.
Were the red and green?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, we'll see. But a part of me also thinks like if they're holding on to the secrecy for so long, they must have some sort of way of subduing maybe the larger effort that these other beings could initiate if they wanted to. You know what I mean? Like they can only get away with hiding it like they do because they're able to subdue some part of it somehow, maybe, you know, like, and maybe once that's overtaken and they can't hide it anymore. Like if we're really getting reports every week. And so by like our Navy ships, like Elizondo said the other day, like that to me, it seems like it would be getting to the point of where like, you better admit this before like they admit it themselves. Kind of thing, you know, because it could only go so long where these things are being visited before it's like either, you know, Navy men or whatever just saying like, frick you guys, like we're going through this stuff. I'm telling people, I'm showing people these videos, or, you know, we'll just start seeing a lot more of them in other areas than sensitive airspace eventually. But, you know, it's just speculation. That's all. All this stuff is. That's the fun part. We get to exercise our imaginative brain.
100%. 100%. I think, you know, I know that we're kind of in overtime here. I was reading Jeff Kripal earlier for my other book club, which starts at 3 in 50 minutes. We're covering Authors of the Impossible and the private book club on and I was reading about how a lot of what was inspiring, like the London Society of Psychical Research, which was did really, really admirable work in the 1880s through, well, for many decades in terms of like debunking or finding evidence for mediums, for like within spiritualism, within paranormal research, poltergeists, all sorts of paranormal phenomena, and Frederick Myers, who was one of the heads of that, was really inspired by the detection of radioactivity. And it really kind of propelled a lot of his thinking at the time in terms of like that there could be an unseen realm that we don't see, that we can't touch, that our senses aren't attuned to, but it's right there, and it can be incredibly detrimental to our health, or really key and have very serious physical effects. And of course, there's a huge parallel here in terms of the phenomenon when it comes to UAP and the DIRDs that came out and things like that in terms of physical effects on people. And so at the same time, when we talk about why now, why is the rollout happening now and things like that, part of me really feels that there's something to the commonly held suspicion that we're really on the verge of being able to detect something that's practically right in front of our eyes, and that we might be in a much richer atmosphere than what we suspect. And it's a guess. I don't have anything to really.
Do you ever smell that fart, but nobody's around?
That's right. That's right. Yep. Ghost farts. It all comes down to ghost farts. Thanks, Sean.
Incredible. Yeah. No, I agree, Jay. I think
so intelligent. Here comes the kid.
It's convergence of worldview. Like there's this point at which we have to, as a world, kind of reach an inflection where our understanding of reality is different enough to make space for whatever this actually is. And until that moment comes, we will never accept it. So I think there is this, we talk about slow roll disclosure, but it just kind of has to be that way. And but it's happening in a reciprocal fashion. So there are disclosure bits that happen, and then that is reciprocated in the public with other experience. Oh, I've had that experience, or I know someone that's had that experience. Let me add that to this pile in the room called disclosure. And the government says, oh, you've had that experience. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're also studying this. And then they say, oh yeah, well, actually I know someone who's had that. So you can see it becomes a collaborative exercise, which it pretty much has to be for the world to come along. We do all need to be participating in whatever this happens to be ready to accept it. And I also think that it's going to be a situation where it's one of those points in history where it's literally a paradigm shift. Like it's such a change in the way we think about everything that you can put it on the calendar. It's before this and after this, and the way in which we conduct ourselves, relate with each other, view the cosmos.
BCAD.
Yeah, I do. I think it will be like that. And it'll usher in all kinds of new change in the process, which would be very exciting, but also very disruptive.
Yeah. I always think like nobody will believe anything that comes along until they have a personal experience with it. Like whether it's data, video, or whatever, people will say it's fake or made up till the cows come home, no matter what, until they see it, touch it, or smell it, or it affects their consciousness somehow. It could all be denial, but
yeah.
For specific.
Well, even if a clear picture showed up, nobody would believe it, because of all of our imaging capabilities now, like with the
you don't know what it really looks like, right? Like,
exactly.
That's my thing.
Katie had a comment for what Jay was saying. She said she has, she's a epidemiologist, so it's the body has to have some sort of response to this, especially on an immunological level, because it's just so subtle. Do you know what I mean? But I don't know how people would test for that so quickly, especially if you're like, I had an experience. You can't exactly call your doctor and be like, hey, I had an experience. Can you test my, blood without a doctor calling it in?
COVID. But there are cases out there that you can look at historically when it comes to being studied medically, going back many years. Look, I think it was the Falcon Lake in Canada incident. What was that, 67? There was a lot of studies done on the people involved in that, and a lot since then as well. So it is out there. I think too many times Cash
Cash
Landrum,
Landrum, yeah.
yeah. So it's out there. Maybe there's not that much data, but it, you know, you can certainly maybe start piecing little puzzles together and
Absolutely.
build a slightly bigger picture. If you're focusing on the kind of medical side of things, there is some information available.
I mean, that's what COVID is. There's no real COVID. They're just a test. They want to see how well the tests do when people experience things.
He said the C word. This episode's going to
I'm
get
just
taken
going-
down.
I'm just like, they're really experiencer tests. Yeah. Just kidding. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's like you can't even imagine what things are going to be like. And I always say, like, when I ask my dad or whatever, I'm like, did you ever imagine that, you know, we'd have things like cell phones and be able to talk to people online? Did you ever even think for 1 second when you were my age that could be a thing? No, no. Like, so whatever a lot of us try to think of what it could be like, we're not going to even be able to guess. You know, it's going to be something totally different in a lot of ways. Maybe some ways not so much, but you know, Space Odyssey, even 2001, like the guy it was FaceTiming his daughter. You know,
Yeah,
like what?
that's pretty good.
That's some intuition right there. You know, foresight, but you know, so that kind of goes against the point I was making. But you know, there's probably a little of both. Knowing and not knowing what it's going to be like.
Olaf, do you have any closing remarks or anything to add to what everybody was just saying?
No, I'm just agreeing. I'm getting whiplash from nodding. But like, it's so nice to just hear everyone riff off each other. Like, I can tell that you're all podcast hosts. Like, it's I'm the odd one out, but I'm growing into my role. To talk to people like this. Like for me, I just have to snap out of it and remind myself that I'm not actually just looking at the show. I'm I'm on it, so I should remember that. You know, but yeah. So
Well, just know that your opinion is valued just as much as
Yes.
everybody else's, especially the wonderful, beautiful artists you are. You're going to have so much insight
Yeah.
that, you know, none of us would think of, just like everybody else. You know, we're each individuals. So
thanks.
And we
man.
love having you, even if you don't want to talk. We still love having you. It's good to
Oh,
see your
it's-
face. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm talking about farts, dude. So you can say whatever you want.
Exactly. Yeah. Sean's
Like,
really
literally,
working off the page.
I'm
for
setting the
sure.
bar low so
Yeah.
everyone can just waltz in.
No, it's underground.
oh my,
Oh, that's going too far.
never too far for Graeme. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for coming. Like we said, we are reading next month Extraterrestrial by Avi Loeb. And I want to try to keep it consistently like the last Saturday of the month, if that works for everybody. Just so we have like a day, you know what I mean? And you can get with me on that later and I'll announce it and I'll get that information to Katie as well. And what's everybody have going on? What's going on for everybody next? You want to talk about like what you have?
Are we talking about the last Saturday of May now, or are we jumping to June?
Whatever you
'Cause we're-
guys think. I'm open.
It's 3 weeks away. Is the last Saturday in?
Do we want to do
in
the
May.
first Saturday of June?
I'm gonna be away
Ooh.
that weekend.
I'm going to be away
as
that
well.
weekend too.
So what
guess
about
I'm gonna be in my head.
We know.
I mean,
I think we can coordinate this offline, right? But it'll be
No.
Yeah. We'll work on it. We'll figure it out.
yeah,
It'll
yeah,
be
we can
soon.
talk
Yeah.
later.
Let's get the crowds
we
inside.
got to
What
get
do you think?
Avi in here too, right? He's got to show up so we can.
oh
Oh yeah, who's
yeah.
gonna get Avi?
I can speak to Avi. No, let me just think. Yeah, depending on the date, obviously, because I know
Well,
he's busy
you-
up until the end of May. He's pretty much not doing
How-
any appearances.
We talked before the show about having a different type of show for give people a break. Why don't we schedule it for the end of June and then have a little interim show in between? Where we talk
I
about
think
other
that's a good
things.
idea. That's a good
That
idea.
sounds super fun. That sounds
And we
great.
can invite some other people in as well.
We can do live from
Absolutely.
Blackpool.
Live from Blackpool.
Ooh,
Oh, all right.
with Sukalos.
Big.
That
Oh my
sounds
God.
awesome.
I don't know why I freak out every time somebody says his name. He's just a big personality. So
Yeah.
yeah,
He
we'll talk
appears.
about dates and get them out to everybody. And does anybody want to talk about any events they have coming up or shows coming up?
I got a greatest hits coming out later today.
Oh,
All
yeah.
right.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Looking forward to that.
Jeez.
About an hour and a half from my first year of interviews. The longest clips probably like 6 minutes, but all of them are kind of just like short little clips from all the different people that I've talked with. I think I have one with everyone here except for Olof because he's never been on the show. But
But we'll fix that
Yeah,
eventually.
that'd be great. Yeah, but so I think hopefully people enjoy that. So a year doing this, and I feel like I've talked to so many different people, and I can't say if I've grown or have degressed. I'm just
No.
kidding, but it feels like a lot of time has passed, and I'm so thankful to meet people like yourself and be in this position. So, and yeah, it's been a year, so it's kind of somewhat of a
You've done so
celebration,
much.
even if
You've
for
done so
myself.
much.
So,
Absolutely.
You've
Yeah.
done some great work. You've
I
really
think
done a lot.
It's about same for me with the 1 year. I think it's about the 1 year exactly for my first experience or illustration that I got through Twitter. So that's about the time when I started to engage with all this.
wow.
And I'm so glad that we got the date for later this summer, because in 3 weeks I'm moving to Stockholm, and I'm
Wow.
gonna
Oh,
spend the
cool.
whole summer there, because I have multiple gallery bookings and like exhibitions.
Excellent. That's
So
awesome.
Very cool.
I will be uploading some more information about that, but
Cool.
you'll see me updating as we go along on that journey
Nice.
as well.
Sweet.
Well, congratulations. That's really cool.
Thank you.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, we're doing Dr. Michael Masters on the 12th. We've got Lou Elizondo next week on the 18th, or the week after next. A lot of things coming up for us. Excited about it.
What have I got? I've got Caroline Corey, Chris Leto, Randall Nickerson. Then I've got my science panel with Gary Nolan, Michael Masters, Rich Hoffman, and Kevin Knuth. Then I've got
gonna
David
be insane.
Marler. Yeah, so lots coming up.
So just follow Vinny. I have his information. Yeah, all these guys are in the description. So if you need to follow them, I'm sure you do already.
Speaking of Dave Marler, he speaks to Dave Partridge and myself on the Unidentified Aerial podcast, which Andy's putting together and should be out next week sometime. So we're talking about something from the 1940s, so you'll have to listen in to find out exactly what it's about.
Nice.
Very
Excited.
cool. That's going to be very cool.
I've got
All right.
I've got a few Experiencer Group Roundtable episodes in the can that'll probably be coming out in the next week or 10 days. But other than that, I've been building a brand new interface for the Experiencer Group site altogether, which is it's like way more robust. It's crazy. It's a huge project, and I'm kind of surprised I haven't had an aneurysm about it already. But it's a wonky project, but it's going to be awesome. And so I'm looking forward to what that'll mean for the community in the months and years to come. It'll provide like a really nice foundation. So
It's
anyway,
awesome.
that's my big project for the next couple of months for sure.
What about you, Pricilla?
Oh, tonight I have Dockside Media coming on to talk about their latest documentary, and that's at 9 Eastern. And then I don't think I have anything going on this next week, which I might keep it that way because I had a consolation, just because trying to get everything completely better here and getting ready to get floors ripped up out of my house. So yeah, I think I might keep this week quiet,
Wait,
but I will definitely be following all your work because there's some really good stuff happening.
that's your house? You live in space?
Yeah, I'm gonna get new space
That's right.
flooring.
That's
So
right.
Who's installing that?
I mean, hopefully
It's
I
gonna be
don't
like
get
one of
sucked
those glass bottom boats.
There you go.
Oh my god, I could never walk on those. I'm like a cat. I'm like, I'm afraid to step on them, even though I know it's glass. Like there's these grown men walking across. I'm like, I'm gonna bust through. I just know it. Like,
Stop looking at Earth and replace that floor panel.
yeah, new floor panels in the spaceship, guys. So
Cool.
Well, thanks to everybody in the chat.
yes, thanks
Yeah.
everybody
Speaking of
for
there.
coming and your support, and thanks for everybody in the panel for coming and your support. And I will see everybody later on and throughout the week. If you're listening on Anomalous Podcast Network, thank you so much. If you're watching now or later or somewhere else, thank you so much as well. Have a good one.
See you soon,
Bye.
everybody.
Good night.